Hey, I'm Bob, the Mortgage Coach Mitchell, and we are working on the third in a series on why credit scoring should be illegal. On the first two, I basically just got up on my soapbox and ranted about things that I thought was wrong with the credit reporting system and that I thought was grossly unfair. And I gave you a couple of examples of one for myself where I used a charge card to rent a car, and it cost me 60 points on my credit scores. Another one was a lady that I did a loan for that only had two charge cards. She had never had a late pay in her life, but yet her credit scores came back in the 500s. The reason being is because she had balances in each one of those accounts. So anyway, there is an article that's going to be linked to in the description that goes into all this in greater detail. I definitely feel free to click on that and read the article. But right now, what I want to talk to you about is how to manipulate it and the process to go by. The very first thing I want to talk to you about is doing this with time on your hands. Get this done early in the process before you start looking at houses. Okay, because it sometimes takes a long time. It can be up to 6 or 8 weeks to get something corrected on your credit report unless you do what they call rapid rescore, which is a service that the credit reporting agencies and bureaus offer to where they'll take new information and immediately rescore you. That can get really expensive real quickly. It's generally $125 per trade line per credit bureau. So if you have one trade line that shows up on all three bureaus, then you're talking about $700-800 right off the bat. So if you do this well enough ahead of time, you'll have time to make the changes and have them work their way through the system to where you don't have to pay that big kind of money. All right, so number one, do it ahead of time. Number two, make sure that you're getting a mortgage credit report pulled. Reach out to a credit reporting to a mortgage banker. They're generally going to be more expensive than you can get online, but they are going to be the gold standard. They're going to check all three bureaus, and they're also going to check public records, which is something that you need to check because there might be somebody with a similar name that got sued in the next county over that the credit reporting agencies are picking up as belong to you. So anyway, again, you want to do the full-fledged mortgage credit report. The other reason is because the models are a little bit different. The model that you get on a Credit Karma or through your charge card is going to be more of a general model. We specifically use the mortgage banking model on all three of them. Okay, and they're a little bit different. I think it's a little bit more conservative. I think it hits you up a little bit harder. So where if you might see that you have a 640 on Credit Karma, when I pull the credit report on you, your Experian might only be a 615 instead of that 640. It's because we use a slightly different model. So you might as well use that model going in. That way there won't be any surprises coming down the road. Okay, so make sure that you do. Now, it is going to generally cost you, okay, a full-blown mortgage credit report with all three bureaus checked and public records checked and all that sort of thing. It's generally going to be about $55 to $75 in that thing. My company charges $65. So anyway, time, mortgage credit report. Okay, after you get the report, look at the scores, go over each one of the trade lines, make sure that it's accurate and it's the correct information. Now, I do want to point out that this whole process is ripe with the chances of unintended consequences. So if you get in there and it's just one or two trade lines, feel free to reach out to me. I'll give you the best advice I can give you. But if it's more than one or two things, you might want to consider hiring a professional. I actually have a company, actually two companies that I use for my credit repair. Be very careful of credit repair companies because they range the thing from being out and out scams to being very, very good. The company that I utilize, I think is very, very good. I've been utilizing them for a number of years now, and they've done very, very well. I think they average something like 54 points improvement per month. So, and then they charge on a subscription basis with no contract. So as opposed to having to put $2,000 or $3,000 into the process, you're only going to be paying $79 or $89 a month while you're using their services. So hopefully you can get out of it in 3 or 4 months, and it's only going to cost you, $300 or $400 as opposed to $2,000 or $3,000. So anyway, once you do it, make sure that it's all accurate. Make a determination whether it's worth changing. I'll give you another example. Did a loan for a guy who on his he had a charged off account that had a balance owing on it that the card was like 6.5 years old. Okay, it was a relatively small balance, something like $35. So he figured, well, I want to buy a house. I want to look as good as I can. I'll go ahead and he paid that off. Well, unintended consequences. Basically, that changed the date of last activity on that account to the date that he made the payment. That was the date of last activity. So that means that that negative information is going to stay on there for 7 years from that date of last activity. If you just let it ride and not paid it, it would have fallen off in 6 more months. Okay, also, since it's old, it doesn't affect your scores that much. And most of the time, if it's old like that, an underwriter's not going to make you pay it off, especially if it's been charged off. So again, be careful of unintended consequences. When you get to this point, reach out to and get professional help if it's more than one or two small things. Anyway, paying down debt is a big one. We talked a little bit about credit utilization. That's the percentage of your balance to your credit limit. The higher it is, the closer to the credit limit, particularly if you go over, is going to really start zinging your credit score. So if you're at like 95% of your available credit, the credit scoring models are going to score you as if you were tapped out, and they're going to ding you on that. Okay, that's easy to fix. You just pay it down. Okay, so let's say that you had a $1,000 limit and you had an $800 balance on it. You're at an 80% credit utilization rate. The credit scoring models are going to zing you on that. But if you pay it down to less than $500, it's still going to zing you, but not as much. Pay it down to less than $300, so less than 30%, it's going to slow down on zinging you. When you get it down to less than 10%, it might actually help you. So anyway, that's the other thing, is to take a look at the balances. If you got anything that's close to its limits, pay it off. Or pay them down to get away from the limit. Again, if you run into anything, if you have any questions, it gets kind of complicated, feel free to reach out to me. I am Bob, the Mortgage Coach Mitchell. Now let's put you into a house, okay? Bye-bye.